Ladies and gentlemen, good evening from here in cold Ann Arbor. It is negative 10 degrees Celsius, but a warm welcome to all of you wherever you are. Daniel, I know you're in Taiwan right now. Hello to you, and hello to everybody else who is here in Ann Arbor or anywhere else. It's such a delight to have you here. My name is John Branch. I'm a professor in the Marketing and International Groups here at the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. And I am absolutely delighted to be your moderator for this evening's discussion about consulting. And I think we've got a great panel set up for tonight. I know we have a great panel set up for tonight to talk about consulting in the larger scheme of things, but also consulting in a time of turbulence, right? We've got some crazy things going on in the world, and it has changed the fundamental ways in which we conduct business. So a couple of housekeeping rules for this evening. We're going to keep to our time. We'll be finished at exactly 9:30 tonight because our guests have other activities going on, and I know that you're also busy people. We want you to be involved in this panel, meaning we want you to ask questions. We have the chat room open, so if you have questions, please post them in the chat room. I have my list of questions which I want to ask, but this is your panel, not my panel. So please post your questions in the chat room. Please keep your cameras on also. We want to make this as human as possible, right? So keep your cameras on. If you're ready, let's begin. Welcome again to our consulting panel for this year's conference. And I'd like to give each of our panelists just a minute or so to do a quick introduction. So, Stephen, do you mind starting us out? Who are you? Where are you? What are you currently doing? And your special question for tonight, if you had a superpower, what would be your superpower and why? Stephen, please, welcome.
Sure. Thank you, Professor. Again, I'm currently in New Canaan, Connecticut. I'm a principal economist at Baker McKenzie, based in New York. I actually started my consulting career at Price Waterhouse in Washington, D.C. In 1994. Shortly after, I spent some time in Tokyo for 2 years. Pivoted to Goldman Sachs in between my business school terms, and actually went to KPMG in Helsinki in Finland. Spent 4 years there to lead the deals practice, and then arrived in Shanghai in 2005 to set up KPMG's transfer pricing practice in China, as well as lead its Asia transfer pricing practice. In 2011, I returned to PricewaterhouseCoopers to lead its global value chain transformation practice. Spent 4 more years in Shanghai before returning to New York in 2014, where I led PwC's Asia Business Center to service inbound Asian clients. I took a short career break to manage my family's real estate business, and then just started at Baker McKenzie. I guess, Professor, you said, what's a special question I'm supposed to answer?
If you had a superpower, what would be your superpower and why?
If I have a superpower, I wish I could make COVID go away and I can travel again. So.
I think that's a great superpower. Thank you very much. Again, welcome, Stephen. Great to have you here, and thank you for participating. Thomas, let's go to you. Thomas, where are you? Who are you? What are you? And here's your special question. If you were a professional wrestler, what would be your entrance song?
That's great. All right, Tom Lagenza, currently in Newport Beach, where it's a frigid 71 degrees here, but you know, it'll warm up. So basically, I'm an undergrad from the University of Michigan in the comp sci. When I was at the University of Michigan, I helped start up a company. We got it to 100 employees. It was an electronic manufacturing company, 100 employees. $10 million in revenue a long time ago, which would be the equivalent to about $100 million in revenue today. That was a great experience, entrepreneurship, until Sony saw the niche that we created. And they were producing in Asia, we were producing just outside of Ann Arbor. So I also not only learned how to start up a company, I learned how to shut a company down and still be able to retain some of the value and put it into my bank account. After graduating, I went on to a company called Hewitt Associates, where I was an internal consultant with them, a liaison between their three of their main practices and the IT group. From there, I got my MBA at Kellogg, and then I went on to A.T. Kearney for 5 years, where I had done a lot of their strategy and supply chain work. After that, I went to a company called Anderson Consulting, which is now Accenture. I think if you look at the 500,000 employees that the company currently has, I'm in the top probably 1%, 2% of people who've been there, I guess, the longest. Part of my career, I was sent over to Asia, where I helped build the supply chain practice. I was responsible for all of China, South Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. Currently, with COVID, I've been kind of locked down here in the States. Right when it hit, I was over in Spain and in Africa working. And then when our president kind of locked down the airspace, I had about 2 days to make it back to the States. So in regards to my song, I have absolutely no idea about that, but I do want to touch on the COVID, and I do want to touch on what Stephen said. I just came from the hospital just down the street about an hour ago. My wife has a fairly serious situation. They thought they might be doing a procedure on her today. It looks like it'll probably be tomorrow. But what's interesting is the hospital, as I was having a conversation with our nurse and the doctor, they had, made me aware that 75% of that hospital, which is fairly large, had been converted to take care of COVID cases. And, 10 minutes before I left, down the hall, which was kind of quarantined for COVID, one person passed away. And it really brings it to life when you find out it's not just something that people are talking about, but the hospitals here in California are under deep stress. And they tell me every day someone dies. And when I go back there tomorrow, 2 more people will probably have passed away just doors away from my wife. So special, I don't know about the song, but Special Power, I definitely agree with what Stephen said.
Thank you, and we're now thinking of your wife and you. So best wishes, James. It brings us to you, James. Tell us who you are, where you are, what you're doing, and your special question. Unless you want to answer in a COVID question also, but your special question: if the zombie apocalypse was coming and you could bring one person with you, who would it be?
Okay. So I'm in Boston. I'm usually based in China, Shanghai, but I'm actually in Boston. So the time zone, we're in the same time zone. And our firm is investment banking firm, actually. And our primary work is the M&A and also investing. So it's almost on a daily basis, we advise our clients in buying and selling their businesses across a broad spectrum of industries. And for a while, we tend to deal with bigger deals, but now actually bigger companies are not necessarily the size-wise. Okay, more people, 10,000 people tend to make much less money than a company with a few hundred people. So we're dealing with a lot more smaller tech companies also, and actually all of the companies we deal with have something that's bright, but also a lot of problems. Without problems, we don't want to come to us. So I always tell my employees, my colleagues, that if they if these people are really, good at what they do, or they don't have a problem, why should they come to you? So a doctor can't really tell your patient why are you sick, because otherwise why would they come to see you? So we're in the business of mainly cross-border. I do a lot with Europe, less with the US, and also with Asia. Buy, sell businesses, and also investing, dealing with bigger companies, smaller companies, some traditional, some tech, all over the place. So, my career wise, I've been, I was one of the founders of the firm. We've been in the market as a firm for 20 years. I almost forgot where I used to work, but I experienced the earlier days of a number of other firms in Asia when they were all small. So, I was an intern with A.T. Kearney as an undergrad. At the time, they only had like probably 12 people in Hong Kong. So, majority of the people, end up doing extremely well. I was an intern with Bain in Hong Kong when they probably had less than 20 people, and I think all of them did extremely well. Some are, for example, at the time an analyst at Bain, became today CEO of Yum, etc. So they all did very well. So I interned at two good firms. I got a good offer. I think they ranked me number one at BCG. I didn't join them, but I did know all of the people. Then again, their office was small in Shanghai. The office was again, less than 20 people. I think at the time they all did pretty well. One kind of firm. I spent time at McKinsey the earlier days, and again, the firms were small. I was in corporate finance practice and also the general practice. I saw these firms, but those were firms of a different time. At the time that looking at the past, you can draw trajectory to predict the future, and talking about strategy formulation, strategic anticipation, that kind of crap. And today, if anyone comes to talk to me about the war strategy, I mean, I'm going to slam the door and kick them out. Okay, so that's about. And then COVID. Not much about COVID. I haven't had it yet, so I can't answer. I can't comment on that. So I come from China, and Stephen is a family friend. So we have friends. I saw Tom last year. I was in Ann Arbor last year. Coming out of China, I hold a degree from Harvard, and one from Oxford, and one from Chicago. I did live in the Midwest. So I've been around in different parts of the world. And the question about what zombie, who do I want to take?
The zombie apocalypse is coming. You can bring one person with you. Who would it be?
Oh, would that be Donald Trump?
Donald Trump would be the person you bring. Okay, fair enough. On that point.
Okay, cool.
Let's move on to our next question, gentlemen. Let's keep the questions and the answers kind of rapid fire. We'll keep this going quickly. What drew you to consulting? What was it about consulting which made it an attractive career? Let's start with you, Tom.
Yeah, what drew me was I thrive on challenge. I like the fast pace. And the great thing about consulting is that you're always faced with the biggest challenges, because if a company can do it, they do it themselves. It's those challenges that they can't figure out, they can't handle themselves, that they go to a third party. But the other thing is, I get bored after 6 months. So what happens if I was internal into a corporation, I did something exciting, then to me, it's like I keep pushing the button. So where I might be working today here in California, 6 months from now, I'm going to be helping a company over in Hong Kong or a company in Spain. So the items are, it's very fast paced, which I enjoy. It's helping companies with the biggest problem that they have, like survival. And then also it's the ability to travel and learn about many different cultures, live many different lives in a short period of time, relatively short period of time.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tom. Over to you, Stephen. You've done a lot of consulting in various practices. What drew you to consulting?
Sure. Again, I'm very lucky that I didn't try to sell James any consulting work earlier in my career. I also would have ended quite quickly with his door slamming on me. But I totally agree with Thomas. I think it's exposure. I think I get bored very easily myself too. But I think the fact that as a young grad, that you're working with the largest companies in the world, solving very complex problems. In my case, I mean, similar to everyone on this panel, I'm able to see different perspectives. I think what got me extremely interested in consulting is not only just providing advice to clients, but more to see things from different perspective. As I mentioned before, I learned all I could from my days in DC. By the time when I show up in Japan, it seems like whatever I learn needs to be challenged, and then did that a few times in different geographies. I really learned to appreciate the different perspectives, and I think, and most important of all, as I mentioned before, I'm fortunate enough to take a very short career break, and then in a way eat my own medicine. I mean that every single advice I've been giving clients for the past 25 years, when I actually ran my own business a little bit, and I realized that, well, maybe not all the advice I have been given or giving other folks are as relevant or applicable. So again, glad to be back in consulting again. So thanks, Professor.
Nice. Thank you, Stephen. And James, what about you? What drew you into consulting?
Okay, what drew me into it is also what I'm doing that's slightly different. And our firm is in, I'll say, our business probably called advisory. But the work is always partly strategic. Nowadays you can't really separate, the world. Just like economics, you can't really say mathematics, economics, that's separate. They're not. So what drew me into the industry actually was for, superficially a right reason, but actually a wrong reason. Okay, if you have an offer from McKinsey, you take it, but that's the wrong reason. And I took it's a wrong reason. Okay, the salary was good for that age, that time. The name was good, but both are wrong reasons. You should not go into a job. If a name like Goldman, like McKinsey is good, you take it. That's the wrong reason, but I took it for the wrong reason. And I think it was probably a wrong decision also. The pay, when you're out of MBA, there's also not a bad job. So yeah, that's what drew me into, follow the crowd, which is the wrong thing to do, and I advise you not to take that path. You should take the path that you believe. Your heart knows where you want to go, but then you're pressed by your peers, and don't take that path, because otherwise you won't become a Bill Gates. So that's a big loss. And then so that's how I got into the industry, and then I got out of it also because it's a different story than undergraduate who get a job at a firm like BCG McKinsey. I think I learned a lot at Kearney because I was an undergrad intern. I learned reasonably okay at Bain because I was an intern. At McKinsey, I said, wow, my God, I worked and you guys know nothing. And then you try to advise the people who know something. And that's exactly what you're trying to do. And you're going to do something that is academically potentially defensive. Actually, they're not. McKinsey tried to make sense out of valuation of Yahoo then. It's just like you try to make sense out of valuation of Tesla. You throw that thing at McKinsey, they're going to make sense out of it until the stock collapses. Then they're going to make sense out of it again. So my biggest lesson from out of that experience is that, it makes sense. I tell people the reason a consulting firm exists, it's got to be for a reason. Customers pay them, so they exist. There's got to be a reason. The reason I can't explain, I don't know, but they don't exist for nothing. They got to exist for value. Okay, that's for sure. But I don't completely know. So how I got in the industry because of the name, because of salary. Okay, and then I got out of the industry into a startup, which later failed. Okay, so that made me regret, and then no, not really that bad. After my startup failed, I rode, I think, back to the managing partner at BCG and said, "Can you give me the job back?" And then I got a mail, kindly, sarcastically saying that, "Oh, after all, consulting is not that bad. Sorry, there's no job." And I'm really grateful that he didn't give me a job, because if I'd given me that job, I wouldn't be where I am today. So that's the second phase that happened in my life, and then I started this firm. So today I think we're doing okay. We're doing doing well. And I think if you in any service industry, not necessarily consulting, but you can see offer, if you're in the service industry, and nowadays you don't have to wear a suit or tie, but pretend those old days, suit and tie, a nice pair of leather shoes, jobs. You do, provide service to some people. And this business, if you're well positioned, then you deal with pretty, let's say you deal with decision makers. That's what we do. And then you can learn. It's exciting to see how people make decisions. You can observe how they think, how they face uncertainties, and how eventually decisions are made. Of course, majority of decisions are made based on emotions, and based on personal biases. I say definitely over half. I can't name statistics, but when we see major decision, major meaning really, if you spend your whole career, your life building a business and going to sell it, something that really not only impacts your pocket, but probably impact a lot of things. And so how do you come up to that decision? It's almost like, if you want to find a partner, wife, husband, or whatever partner, how do you make a decision? You can do a weighted average, right? You can do a whole bunch of parameters, assign weights, and add them up. And at the end of the day, how do you make a decision? I don't think, you're going to look at that sheet of paper. You're going to hit your head and say, hey, does it work for me or not? So that's how, the excitement of my work is that I see a lot of decision making. I'm involved in it and I'm learning. It's a lot of fun to be involved. But then if it also involves a lot of your own money, there's a lot of emotion. And that's stressful. And I don't say that's a great thing. It's stressful. If you watch a movie about, played by other people, is one thing. If you watch that, your stake, you have a big stake in it, is stressful. It's just, I say it's good. If I were 10 years younger, I'm going to use a word which you guys might love to say, in job interview. I think you can still use this word in your job interview, but don't lie to yourself. Okay, the word called intellectually challenging, intellectually stimulating. That's a nice word to get you a job, but nowadays, I just can't use those words myself. So it's exciting to see differences, see people make decisions, and see majority of the time decisions are made based upon personal experience, biases, emotions, and sometimes everyone pretends to analyze. But at the end of the day, I say, you are a human being, your emotions. Just look at how stock price at GameStop and also at Tesla go. How people make decisions. Okay, so that's more or less, I say, any job is good. Be yourself. I enjoy seeing a lot of people. Not necessarily big company, big people, but a lot of people making decisions and
good.
Go through the roller coaster with them.
Thank you, James. Thank you. I have tons of questions, ladies and gentlemen, but I want you to put your questions in the chat room. So please get your questions in the chat room for these folks. I'm going to continue with my questions until you start asking your own questions. Gentlemen, it seems that all three of you have an MBA, correct? And you've done the MBA for a reason. We've got business students here in the room and others, but lots of business students. Tell me what you think about the MBA as a valuable degree and as a stepping stone in your career path. Any thoughts there? Stephen, we'll start with you.
Sure. I'm very grateful that I had a chance to again take a little bit of break from working and pursue my full-time MBA. So I went to Dartmouth for undergrad. Really loved it. Worked at Price Waterhouse for a little bit, as I stated before. Did both U.S. and Japan before returning to Dartmouth to get my MBA. And I think what it taught me was humble pie, meaning that however I arrive at my MBA program, I thought that I have certain strength. I thought I have certain weakness. But the fact that there are all these classmates who are in the same situation as me, meaning that whether they were in executives or in consulting or in finance or even in military, everyone's really bringing different perspectives to the table. So I think the funniest story I have is, by the time when I enter MBA, having been in I guess in advising multinationals for a while, especially on financial matters. PwC was the largest accounting firm. I thought that should be my strength, right? Financial modeling, accounting. I still remember a few classmates, one's from military, the other one's actually runs a vineyard from her family business. They really creamed me in accounting class. So, so things like that, and then prior to going to business school, I thought marketing would be my sort of the challenge for me because I'm quite shy before. Little did I know that subjects such as organizational behavior is probably the most important takeaway for me in terms of understanding how to manage people later and public speaking. So
humble pie, it's quite tasty sometimes, isn't it, Stephen?
yeah.
Tom, tell us about your Kellogg experience and how that has contributed to your success, or indeed perhaps maybe failure in your career.
True, humble pie. Someday, maybe like James and Stephen, I'll be a success too. But at the moment, I'm still trying. So, James, hey, it's good to see you again. Remember I met you last year? You and I are kind of alumni here.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, we were the early days of A.T. Kearney, and it was a very special place.
So the thing about it is, if I would not have done an MBA, I would not have got into A.T. Kearney, right? From that standpoint. So for me, I was in a consulting firm. It was a benefits consulting firm, but to make that transition into more of a operations or a strategy consulting firm, I had to have an MBA, and I had to have a MBA that was a pedigree. So for me, the MBA essentially did two things. The first thing was it opened up the doors that would have been closed to me from that standpoint. The second thing that it did was a lot of contacts. To this day, I still leverage a lot of those contacts. Now, what's interesting is in Accenture, and as I mentioned, we have 500,000 employees roughly. The MBA, there's very, very few people that actually have an MBA, and there's very few percentage of our leaders in Accenture that have an MBA. A lot of our leaders came undergrad, they came in as an analyst, and they've been here for 25 years, and now they're our senior leadership. For them, for someone who would have come in the company as an analyst from undergrad, I would say the MBA, unless you're thinking about going to another consulting firm, like a McKinsey, et cetera, A.T. Kearney, I wouldn't do the MBA, I wouldn't spend the money on it. But for me, I needed to open up those doors, and again, for those contacts that I've made that have been helpful for my career.
Very nice, very nice. James, I'm not going to allow you to answer this question because I want to move on to a different question. We've had two great answers, but I'm going to start another question for you, James. When I think of consulting and the consulting which I have done in my career and I continue to do, one of the things which I love, just as you said, Tom, is sort of the fast-paced, the change, the constantly new things going on in your life. My impression is that is even more of a feature in Asian markets. The Asian markets are changing even more rapidly than so-called developed nations of Western Europe and North America. James, give us your sense of the speed of change and how this affects the consulting world in Asia.
Okay, it's a big question. First, the hours in Asia is too long. I feel that is wrong. Both investment banking, consulting in Asian offices, they're just longer than their US counterparts. I mean, if you work in any consulting firm based in Hong Kong or China, I think easily they pull in 80 hours. But if you compare to their New York, Chicago offices, you can't do 80. People will rebel. So that's
boys and girls. James.
Yeah.
Boys and girls. If James hasn't convinced you not to go into consulting by now, this last remark is certainly convincing convincing you not to go into consulting.
Okay. Okay. So next about the changes. You pretty much do. Actually, we do. What your customers need, right? So you're really pulled. You might think I'm gonna, consulting firms, how do they think about strategies for themselves? Actually, they follow their customers because their customers pay them. So in Asia, things change quicker. Say things are more traditional in Europe. For example, Siemens is a big customer, a lot of consulting firms, because what they do is, they follow a track and they need a lot of support. But out of Asia, you think about firms like Alibaba in year 2000, they barely existed, right? Today, they're so big. So your customers keep changing. So you have to follow that. You follow the trend. So at one point, the field firm, investment bank, consulting firm, auditing firm, tax advisors, and the lawyers, they do the same. You just serve the same thing from different angles, and all work is important. But if you think in Asia, a lot of things go digital. They are ahead. US actually has very advanced technologies and things, but it's not even. And in China, for example, payment, right? Nowadays, people don't use a lot of cash. I'm not in that business, but I'm sure that leads to a work much more than in US or Europe, because if you go to Germany and people just prefer to use the cash, then that's what customers want. So you're really led by your customers' needs, and there is a lot of digitalization in that area. And the next area which I'm not very sure is that there are a lot of startups that are reasonably well funded, and they do need a lot of support, but I don't know if they're able to afford the consulting fees or not. That's harder to say, but we're seeing a market, and then things change so rapidly. If you, for example, if you look at the electric vehicle market, we have a few deals going on in this area. So there's one company, I won't name it, but a year ago, this time last year, I think the runway was probably less than 6 months, so out of 6 months. But then COVID hit, right? If you're with COVID and your runway is 6 months, so we're waiting for your bankruptcy. Reasonable expectation, strategic anticipation. Okay, and then they successfully did a SPAC IPO, and today is worth $4.5 billion. Do you think they can afford a consultant or not? A good consultant or not? They do. So things change so rapidly that you just have to catch up with your customers. Capital market is changing, and then about 2 years ago, the EV market was very bad globally, and a lot of electric vehicle companies were near bankruptcy, and now they're all like flying in the sky. So you follow your customers. I think tech is a big thing now. Tech used to be,
James, may I interrupt you for just
sure.
there? Thank you. I want to bring Stephen in on this because he also has some very interesting experiences. 4 years in Helsinki in Finland, right? Time in Japan, time in Shanghai, time here in the United States. Give us your sense of these differences going on in the consulting world around the world.
Yeah, I guess James already covers sort of the external environment that's including the fast pace in Asia. I kind of want to refer to Thomas's comment about being in a really big firm, right? Thomas, as you mentioned, being one among 500,000. I actually in my career struggled to really fit into these big companies. I mean that in PwC we're 300,000. KPMG at one point is not as big, but big enough. And I think one point that I want to mention is a concept called battlefield promotion, meaning that when I started in DC, yes, it's extremely exciting. There's a lot of exposure, but you really have to try really hard to get noticed, to get the best projects, to work on the best clients. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be seconded to our Tokyo office. Again, maybe my colleagues were extremely patient and nice, but to them, I'm actually someone sent by the US firm, and usually they'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Have your pick of probably more exciting projects than otherwise I would have enjoyed. And again, I sort of continue that trend, try to be in an environment where I'm unique, and I guess in the opportunity to work in Europe, that really changed my perspective as well. Before going to Europe, I would have thought that pace would be a lot slower. But the time when I was working in the Nordic region, there's a lot of excitement about EU expansion, and then how the different national leaders in different industries are consolidating and then building this pan-European organization. And then by the time when I landed in China, I basically cut the tail end of this super expansion from large multinationals. And again, I have to say that it's all due to battlefield promotion. I don't think I would have been promoted as fast if I'm more in the midst of all these action, as what James hinted.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Tom, I want to turn to you with a different question. You shared with us some very personal stuff about COVID, not only that about your wife, but how you were caught in Marrakesh and had to skedaddle out of there to get back to the United States. So we can't really have a discussion about anything in business today without talking about COVID. COVID is affecting everybody. That's a truism. Tell me how you think COVID is affecting consulting, the world of consulting specifically. How have you and your colleagues in consulting responded to the COVID world?
Yeah, let me take a little bit from a business standpoint, and then we can talk a little bit more about, kind of the humanitarian, right? But stop me, I'll pause after the business. I don't want to go too long and eat up too much time, but if you want me to continue, just let me know. So I've seen drastic changes because of COVID before, and this might go into the question that both James and Stephen kind of just touched on a little bit about Asia and all that. So when I started in this business, it was very much that, we would send over the Guaylos over to Asia, so you would have a Western face and the way we do things and introduce. Now it's kind of the opposite. And what we're doing is Asia and certain countries in Europe, from a digital standpoint, are so much more advanced. We're now pulling our expertise from those countries and what we've done there back to the States and other places. So tying that back to COVID, it would be, well, okay, let's see if we can get someone from Asia to fly over and be on our project for the next 3 months, which wasn't always easy to do. Now, because of COVID, everything we do is in Zoom or it's in Teams. And so when I'm working with a client here in the US and we want to introduce a concept that was done 2 years ago back in China or in Taiwan or somewhere over there, I have the ability to get those individuals on my team because they don't have to travel and on those calls with my clients. And so now we're able to now really leverage that 500,000 people around the world doing everything. At some point, we've done everything for someone, right? We now have the ability to leverage that, which is simply amazing. And when I talk to my clients from a COVID standpoint, ADA, which is the American Diabetes Association, I was on a meeting with the CEO yesterday, and basically they're in the process of getting rid of every one of their offices in the US, and they're going to go to 100% workforce working from home. So we're helping them on how to make that transition, right? The processes, the technology, et cetera, et cetera. So COVID is significantly changing the way we're doing things. And I don't think we're going to be going back on a lot of things like being more remote, being more kind of globalized, and being able to bring people via these online conference calls, et cetera. Let me pause there. And if you want me to go further, or if you want to ask that to some others.
Thank you for that answer. Absolutely brilliant. And thank you for the offer for humanitarian. I would love to touch on humanitarian. Let's push it out a little bit. Remind me to come back to it because you've touched on something really interesting here, which is the nature of relationships. And my consulting life and my teaching life, especially in Asia, suggests to me that human relationships are still important. So I'm wondering, maybe we'll bring James in now. In a COVID world right now, are relationships, personal relationships, suffering? And consequently, is that affecting the nature of your business, the viability of your business, not being able to be face to face with your clients?
Definitely. No, all of us, live in the same world and experience the same thing. So, the good thing about say COVID is that, like Tom said, we actually can a lot easier talking to people for a few reasons. One is that you don't have a choice. You can't meet anyway. And second is, if you think about the most of the senior executives are, people who work from home. They're bored. If somebody send them a note and want to talk, and you are an interesting person they want to talk to, so that's all good. We have quite a few major deals that just didn't work out for a very simple reason: trust. You can't say I don't trust. Sure, I trust all of you, but you come and sit together, seeing each other eye to eye. That kind of physical trust were for people who never met, were not able to be established. So we got things, quite a few things that went. Actually, a lot of things that derailed because of that. It's not that okay, I don't trust you because I haven't met you. Sure, I can trust you, but I just I just don't feel that personal feel. I can't see your eyes. I can see you see your eyes from the screen. So a number of these things happen. I see Zoom, or in the same concept, Zoom works. All of these online tools, they are very transactional. They can accomplish a purpose. But what if I just John, come over and knock on your door and sit down and drink a cup of tea and with no purpose? I missed my 2 days in Ann Arbor. This time last year I came. I still kept the champagne glasses. I went to 2 panels. I have 2 champagne glasses. I bragged to people that I actually have 2 Tiffany champagne glasses. That's not just a champagne glass, a Tiffany champagne glasses. And they were from Ann Arbor. These kids were really smart. They picked the right thing. And I even used those to drink red wines so that I can show off my champagne glasses.
James, Dartmouth doesn't give Tiffany champagne glasses.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah. James, thank you. I interrupted you because I saw a question come in from Ash. So Ash actually has 2 questions here. Ash, would you ask the second question, which is very pertinent to what James was just mentioning now? Ash, tell us who you are first, and then ask your question, please. You can't unmute? All right. Well, here's Ash's question. His question is, have there been any cultural roadblocks? And this might be a good one for Stephen to start out with here. So Zoom, as James said, Zoom is a very transactional tool, but it doesn't really replace those face-to-face drinking a cup of tea or having a scotch or going for a dim sum together, right? So, Stephen, what do you say? You've had a lot of cross-cultural experience.
Sure.
What about COVID or just consulting in general and some cultural issues?
Maybe I can contrast it with pre-COVID, right? So, not being Japanese myself, I actually spent half of my secondment getting to know people. And exactly like what James says, you need to build trust before you can even ask for favors. So, and it's the same thing in Europe. I'm pretty sure that I probably eat a lot more out and drink a lot more than I should in order to build those relationships. And that's definitely the case when I first landed in China and didn't really know anyone and have to build relationship one person at a time, one dinner at a time, one drink at a time. And what I'm finding out with COVID is, I want to say existing relationship are probably further strengthened. Um, and even those long lost relationship is quite easy to rekindle, because usually the first question is, how have you been, right? The pandemic actually impacted everyone. I feel less transactional because I can actually care about their family, because they're actually sitting in their living room, and then our office, we can actually talk about non-work related. And one thing I totally agree with James is new relationships, meaning that in the past, it will probably take 3-4 trips to Asia before I even dare to ask certain things, because I don't think it's appropriate. Nowadays, meeting someone cold, even if it's a warm introduction, is probably not as effective. So
Yeah.
people are polite, but asking them for a big project immediately, that just seems a bit crass, and I think, and then so that's basically the challenge right now.
Yeah. Stephen, thank you very much for that. Going to do a gear change here, completely different question. Tom, this one also came in from Ash. Thank you, Ash. Reminds me, everybody, if you have questions, get them in the chat room, please. So Ash has another question here. It's kind of the big fish in a small pond kind of question. Can you compare and contrast the different approaches to a consulting career? That is to say, going to a super huge organization like an Accenture and being one of 500,000, or maybe going to a small, lesser branded organization, but maybe getting a much more meaty project immediately. Any thoughts on the compare and contrast, the trade-offs on those two different career paths?
Yeah, so when I was at Hewitt, they had 2,000 employees. When I was at A.T. Kearney, they had about 2,000 employees. And when I joined here, it was about 300,000. But you know what? From the standpoint of the work I do, it's very similar between A.T. Kearney being at 2,000 and here. Because even though we have 500,000 people, we have practices, right? And you have a supply chain practice, and that practice in the US might be 2,000 people. And then it's a subset. And that strategy practice within the supply chain might only be 50 people. So my universe, if I only focus on the US, is about 50 people. And then it's beyond that is really the relationships that I've built over the years that are so important, right? But when you have 50 people, then it really becomes the project you're on, because everybody reports to somebody, but you only see that somebody when it's time for your review and your raise and your bonus and your promotion. Otherwise, your life is on a project. And that project could be small with 3 people, or it could be large with 50 people. But for the most part, that project is your universe. So at A.T. Kearney, when I was on a project with 7 people, and here at Accenture, when I'm on a project with 7 people, it's exactly the same.
Yeah, yeah, very nice, very nice. Thank you for that insight. I see a question just came in from Tom Sukbuntip. Tom, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. I really appreciate all your insights. So my question to you is
Tom, before you ask your question, who are you? Tell us who you are.
Oh yeah, for sure. Hi guys, I'm Tom. I'm a BBA junior at the University of Michigan, and right now I'm located in Bangkok, Thailand. That's why there's a lot of sunrise here. So it's like 8 a.m. in the morning, but very nice to meet you all.
Sawadee krap.
Yep, sawadee krap. So just a quick question. My question is a pivot of what we're kind of talking about right now. So my question is, what are your thoughts on the uses of cryptocurrency in businesses? Furthermore, has any of your clients tasked you with projects regarding this? And if so, what type of common themes do you see?
What a great question. Cryptocurrency, it's on on everybody's radar these days, along with artificial intelligence and machine learning. Let's start with James. James has a very finance-oriented background. What are your thoughts on cryptocurrency? Any lessons to share with our participants today?
Actually, no, in reality, not too much concrete experience to share. I know people have made money, lost money, but that's really, the investment decision rather than a story. I mean, I know many people who are in it, and then depending on time. So sometimes they did well, sometimes they didn't do well. So it's something that I don't, let's say, not a lot of war story to share. Sorry about that. Maybe I think Tom or Steve have more interesting things to share.
Okay, thanks, James. Stephen, do you have any experience with cryptocurrency?
Sure. I guess that's definitely an area that a lot of clients are looking into. But I have to confess, my prior position in the two firms where we position ourselves to be the guardian of the capital market, so we tend to be more on the conservative part. And again, I have to confess also one of my hobbies is I'm actually into numismatics. So I'm even beyond fiat currency. I collect old coins from ancient times. So I guess I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I'm the polar opposite of, I mean, I'm not saying I believe in the gold standard, but I do collect gold and silver coins for fun. But Thomas?
Yeah, I would pull it back from crypto and say blockchain. So if I recall the conversation we had last year, this is my third time being on this panel, and last year, some of the topics were blockchain, it was AI, it was the cloud, so on and so forth. So if I have to look at this year, right, 2020, looking back and say, if I rank things, I would say cloud was #1 in everybody's mind, right? From a client standpoint. The other thing I'll make a statement, this last year was probably the best year financially that Accenture ever had. I mean, we just blew the socks off of what our projections were. And why was that? Because it was all about survival, right? Our clients were like, we don't know whether we can survive. We don't know how we're going to operate that nobody's in the office. So the big thing was, let's get into the cloud so people can work from anywhere around the world. Second thing, if I rank it, was AI. How can we do things smarter? How can we do things with less people from that standpoint? And then a distant third was that blockchain. Important, but when it came down to survival, it was cloud, AI, and then you know what? When we know that we're going to survive and things are going to get a little bit better, then let's come back to blockchain, crypto, those kind of things.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you. We have a question here from Shinji Takahashi. Shinji, do you want to ask the question yourself or shall I ask it for you? Shinji? I think I'll ask it.
Yeah,
oh, you there? Shinji, are you there?
Okay, yes. So last week's keynote speaker, Subir Lal from the IMF, stated that 80% of an organization's value will be or is intangible capital. So for the field of consulting, would you think that percentage will be or should be higher?
Interesting. Let me state that again. So the thought that the value of a company is intangible. So intangible, I guess you could say intangible would be mostly wrapped up in human beings or perhaps processes or other intangible assets. Consulting seems that it might be even more than 80%. Thoughts about that, Stephen?
Sure. I guess someone who's always been in companies with partnership form, I want to say that this is definitely the case. Again, without our colleagues, without our workforce, we really don't have a firm. So, and you'll find this interesting in that whether it's, you know, in the good old days, a lot of the investment banks continue to exist as a partnership Law firms definitely continue to be in the partnership form. All the large accounting firms are in accounting or in a partnership form. And this is more a testament in that, in a way, a pure corporate form that's overly hierarchical may not be suitable, especially in a firm where we're all supposed to be best friends and all, partners of equals. Of course, barring regulatory constraints, I want to say that what we're seeing in consulting is, I completely agree with Thomas. It's harder and harder to really keep a lot of folks to without specialization. As such, you're going to see more and more pockets, even within large firms, where people are interacting much more often. And as such, that maybe this is a way to continue to preserve the most important IP in each of these firms, which is people.
I'm losing Stephen now. Thank you, Stephen. You cut out there. Why don't we switch to another question? Tom, I see an interesting question here from Ann Tan. I'm going to on her behalf. She says, she's sorry, this is a little bit repetitive. I don't think it is, but it's a question about how does one build trust on Zoom, right? So do you have any experience? How do you think about relationship building and creating trust in this electronic world of ones and zeros? Any thoughts there? And then we'll give James an opportunity because he was the one who kind of brought it up. Start with you, Tom.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is the difference between my time at Kearney. As James said, we worked super hard and we learned a lot. But what I found over at Kearney was when we finished a project, the client was glad that we were gone, right? They're like, we hated you guys. We were afraid that you were going to fire us. You got us the savings, but I don't really want to work with you again. Please leave. The model over at Accenture is totally different. How do you go from a 2,000 person firm to a 500,000? It's because you have repeat business. You have some diamond or some core clients that the value, as James said, the value is there. The ROI is big enough that they just want to keep working with you year after year after year and grow that environment. So what I learned from a cultural standpoint at Accenture, it's important to be good, right? But it's also more important to build that relationship. And how do you do that? You come across as someone who's similar to the people you're working with, right? Because people like to work with people they like and who are similar to them. So a very big part of my education coming over to Accenture was how to get along, right? Not to have an attitude that I'm a consultant and I know everything and you're just, it's more like, hey, I'm just part of the team. I'm one of you and we're going to work together. This is going to be a great experience. We're all going to learn from it. We're going to do good things for the company and we're going to move forward. So what I found is that time has been collapsed now that we're doing things online. So where maybe a project and assessment was normally 8 weeks, now I only have 4 weeks to do it. And you've got to very quickly build that relationship with those other people on the other side of the computer, right? So like ADA, American Diabetes Association, that I started with 4 weeks, you know, you have to quickly be very friendly, joke, build some rapport, show that you're not threatening. And one of the things I do is say, hey, my assessment is open book. So everything I do will be on your SharePoint. You can review it. You know what's going on. So to summarize, be friendly, right? Relate with the people on the other side of your screen and build trust by being open, right? From that standpoint. And to that, I've learned that, we can do more than we ever did before. I can work on 3 projects versus the one that I had to travel to, right? And what we find is that our clients, I don't think they're going to want us to go back. Some may, but they're like, I'm no longer paying 15% for the travel anymore. This works. I'm not paying for my my locations anymore. I'm having people work from home. I think there has been a dramatic shift in the business. Maybe some of it will go back, but a large portion isn't going to go back. This is going to be our life, I think, going forward.
Tom, what are we going to do without all of our airline miles and our hotel points?
Well, I don't know.
James, you were kind of the person who got this discussion started several questions ago. Any thoughts about, in your experience, how do you, following on from what Tom said, how do you develop trust? How do you develop that rapport when you're separated by ones and zeros?
Basically trying to find offline connections. So actually still the old way. In a sort of simple example, I actually, my first trip to Ann Arbor was this time last year, and I walked away with 2 Tiffany champagne glasses, seriously. Okay, and I remember that for my life. So now when I see somebody who has a Michigan association, I can talk to them a lot easier. I feel more comfortable. And then they, knowing that I've been there, they also probably gonna like me better. So, if I meet somebody who is somehow somewhere is associated with Ann Arbor, I feel closer to that person. I'm gonna point that out, and that person, knowing that I've been there, they probably gonna like me better. So, for example, I spend a lot of time in Japan and in India. Both countries, probably on a high level, people all have some different thoughts about each other. But if I tell them that I've been to your place, and I can even point out some food I ate in your place, it's easier to communicate. So there's actually no big trick. Just trying to find an offline life experience connection, and somehow you're gonna connect it, and then people will. Just sort of common sense, be drawn closer to each other for that common life experience.
That is absolutely great advice. I need to tell you all a quick little story. I have a colleague here at the University of Michigan, and he believes that Americans are fundamentally at a huge disadvantage in international business because they do not understand football. And by football, I mean soccer, right? So, you can go to pretty much any country in the world and start talking to somebody about Manchester United or Real Madrid, and Americans are at a huge disadvantage because of their lack of understanding and appreciation for the world's game. So James, I love how you highlighted that finding those common things, right? Humans, finding those common things about humans, and maybe it's Tiffany glasses from champagne glasses from the University of Michigan. Great. Thank you for that question. Great question, Anne. Ash just double exclamation mark said football is an international language. Yes, indeed. Christine Lee, would you like to ask your question? Unmute.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi, Professor Branch. Hi, Thomas, Stephen, James. So nice to see you. I'm Christine. I'm in Birmingham, Michigan. It's about an hour from Ann Arbor. I am pursuing a degree, executive MBA second year. And lots of students who come to Ross pursuing MBA, trying to make a pivot in their career. Right. And I'm trying to break into the strategy consulting, and I noticed that almost every single company's job description about strategies is slightly different. So I was wondering, like James already mentioned a little bit about his thinking regarding strategy. What kind of strategy consulting services does your firm offer? Do you have any suggestions for someone who is trying to pursue a career in strategy consulting, or maybe even share like a memorable project you worked on in the past? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine. Great question, and it's nice to see you and hear your voice. Gentlemen, let me break that up a little, atomize that a little bit better, because she has 3 questions in there. Let me ask it in a I'll paraphrase it in a slightly different way. Consulting companies, they all do consulting, but they're structured organizationally in very different ways, right? Some are industry based, some are functionally based. Tell us a little bit more about how your organization is structured in terms of the kinds of services which you offer. Let's start with you, Stephen.
Sure. Again, Baker McKenzie is one of the largest global law firm. So as a law firm, we tend to be focused on specialty area. So whether it's mergers and acquisition or IP or tax, these are disciplines that we would have. Now, in terms of dealing with clients, we tend to work quite closely with the C-suite as well as the general counsel. So as the chief legal officer of large companies, their responsibility is to manage the risk of the overall corporation. So in terms of providing strategic insight, that would be the angle that we're playing in as an advisor to manage risk.
Right, right, great. Thank you very much. Tom, what about Accenture? How would you describe its org structure?
Yeah, you know, we have certainly all of the industries, whether you go aerospace, whether you go resources, so on and so forth, and then all the functions. But let me step back. And one of the things about Accenture is we're probably one of, if not the only firm that goes all the way from strategy to operations, right? To kind of that ongoing kind of maintenance and running something. So I'm in the strategy group, and what strategy really to me means, I come in and I create the plans. So for example, when I was there last year, my client was ExxonMobil. And ExxonMobil spends $25 billion a year in building new facilities. And what they needed to do was do that smarter, faster, and more efficiently. So my job was to come in and create the strategy, so the plan, the roadmap, how they would go and do that. And then afterwards, then we would bring in our operations group, which would build that. And as we were talking last year, we'd look and we'd say, okay, when we're going to be building something, we look at what the processes are or what the capabilities. What are the capabilities that are needed? What are the processes that get you that capability? Who's going to be doing that? So what does the organization need to look like? And from a technology, how are you going to enable those people to do it more efficiently? So that's where our operations practice would come in and would build all of that out, further deep design and build it, right? And then there's a lot of stuff that's that ongoing running, back of the house, maybe outsourcing, you might even call that. And that's our kind of our business process services group, I'll use that term, but really all they do is they maintain the operations and make things run that back of the house. So from a strategy standpoint, probably about 5% of our employees worldwide fall into strategy. And then somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40% fall into that operations. And then the remainder is kind of that ongoing running the systems, running the processes, et cetera. That's Accenture. We can do it all the way from beginning to end.
And it takes 500,000 people to do that.
Well, when you essentially are the consulting firm to every one of the top 200 firms, you know, globally, yeah, it does.
Thanks, Tom. I'll pick up on Christine's third question, which was, could you share a memorable project? Let's start with James. If you look back on your very successful career with great pedigreed companies, and now you CEO, founder of your own company, what is that one project which stood out, and maybe the one of which you are most proud? Anything jump to mind for you?
Okay. You know, there's a confirmation bias that if things I remember most are the closest one.
Yeah,
But I actually do want to share with you a deal that we recently did, and probably something about life lessons for younger graduates. So it's about entrepreneurs. So we work with a company in Europe, small company with a unique technology in manufacturing. In the automotive space, you know, autos industry, that just Michigan is probably the auto school, so it should sound, you know, lovely to you. So they you know, auto is like, you need to spend a lot of time doing R&D and doing things right, and once you're in, it's hard to be kicked out, but it's very hard to get in. So that company, you know, unique technology, top 3 in the world, and losing money every year, you know, every moment. That is all, you know, part of the startup. The thing is that this time last year, they really panicked because they were just $50,000 away from bankruptcy. And then I've worked with that. That's my client. Then the CEO, he panicked. He you know, but we all panic. And then he went on and worked hard, really hard. And I know that just nobody can defeat him. And then he went, you know, he laid up people and did what he could and asked for, you know, people to lend him money, this and that. We also invested a bit. So Q2 last year, things turned around. Not still very bad, but he worked very hard. And he was a very, let's say, an honorable person, because a lot of work that I think he did not need to involve me, but since he hired us, he involved us, and then he was willing to pay us. And we actually, I'll say, some of the work was ours, some of the work he didn't have to give it to us. Okay, he went on. So he was an honorable man from a small European country in a good industry, which, you know, is in a deeply troubled cycle where he's just $50,000 away from bankruptcy. So that's Q2, and then Q3 things somehow turn around. He's an EV business, and then the spec market came in, and his customer, who was also 6 months away from bankruptcy, all of a sudden, you know, complete a spec merger, became a $4 billion company. And then Q4, his revenue went up to almost $10 million. And now Q1 this year, he's running out of capacity. So you think, you know, when we're looking for money a year ago, it was for survival, and today is for capacity. What I see here is, you know, I was actually thinking, you know, we came with a question about people and things. I think actually people, most people are good people, most people are smart people. In terms of IQ, we actually are not all that different. But I think some personal qualities, you know, that I learned from that. I mean, that's what I enjoy about, you know, the work is that the perseverance, you know, that I saw in this person, and then also you know, he's an honorable person. That is, you know, we're very afraid people. I mean, Tom and Steve, and, you know, they work for big companies. I don't know how afraid they are that after customer is served, they just owe you and don't pay you, and you're not going to go after them if they really do that to you. So, you know, I'm dealing with an honorable person and a person that cannot be defeated. He's not arrogant, but he's not all that confident, but he kept working until his day, you know, comes. So that's something I say is you know, we're pretty proud that we are doing well. But it strikes me that it's, you know, someone that can, you know, it's my role model.
Very, very good story. Thank you very much. And congratulations on that success. Incredible, really, to see how you turned it around in such a short period of time. Stephen, any project or client sort of jump out for you?
Again, because of a confidentiality clause, I'm not allowed to reveal, but I can describe maybe the most rewarding experience and what kept me going all these years. I think it's the fact that I'm sure Tom and James will agree. There's a concept of being the trusted advisor, meaning that you work so hard for a client that you ended up being the first phone call they'll make, whether they're making extremely tough decisions, or they're contemplating a merger, or they may be even thinking about selling a part of their company off, or even situations where they're considering a succession plan. Who would be the most capable to take over the reins of a empire they just built? I think it's in situations such as these that really makes my consulting career extremely rewarding. That we're trusted by very important people, usually in the utmost confidential situation, often months before that Wall Street Journal would even report on the issue. And I think that's probably the most rewarding part.
Great, thank you. Tom, I want to pick up where you left off with respect to COVID. I promised you I'd come back. So you can speak about COVID from the humanitarian perspective, or maybe open it up a little bit more broadly. Companies are every day faced with ethical challenges, decisions which can affect society, can affect the ecology, can affect people. Any thoughts about your career and how the companies for which you have worked have done well, but also done good?
Well, you know what, I'm going to try and tie that a little bit into the last question about projects. And as James says, usually for us consultants, it's like our most recent project. And I mentioned already ADA, American Diabetes Association. What I think few of us will realize on this call is those nonprofits, they really survive on donations. And donations for this past year for most of the nonprofits that are not directly related to COVID is down by about 50% or more, right? So when I take a look, ADA is one of the smallest clients I've ever had, right? They only have a couple hundred employees, but what they do is very important, right? Diabetes, so many Americans and people around the world have it. So I'm currently working with the board of directors over there to help them survive and help them be, carry on with their mission, right? Which is making people aware of diabetes and how to address it and live with it from that standpoint. And so pretty much the work that we're doing is not for really any profit. It's almost essentially where we're doing it pro bono. And I'd say it's very, very rewarding to help a company like that lost half of their revenue, had to, prior to being engaged, had to let half of their staff around the US go to survive. And now what we're doing is helping them to become stronger, to do what they did and actually do more with the amount of people that they have, right? So one of the big things they would do is they would have an annual conference that has upwards of 20,000 people would join. Under COVID, you can't do that. So what we're helping them is so that they can have their, like we're doing right now, a digital conference. So all of the materials that they produce, having it online, all the speakers, so on and so forth, so that they can reach more than 20,000 people. People don't have to travel, but can join. So that for me is probably one of the most rewarding things is under this COVID, there's all these other things that are being maybe forgotten and are at risk. And we've got to do our best to help all of them, as well as the people being directly affected by COVID.
Hear, 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 hear. Thank you so much, Tom. Folks, we're coming down. We've got about 10 minutes remaining. I still see some questions coming in, so we're going to do a bit of a rapid fire here, okay? So Stephen, I have a question for you. It comes from Blake. Blake presumably is an American student here, and he's asking, what can he do as an American student to prepare himself for an international career like you, Stephen, like Tom, like James? What are some recommendations to be an international globe-trotting business person?
So again, have a really open mind, because again, when I was an undergrad, I was taught that if you want to ever make a living in consulting, learn Japanese and play golf, right? And that makes sense. I mean, I know Thomas is laughing, because back in 1995, right after I graduated, you look at Global Fortune 6, right? The top 6 companies, 5 of them are Japanese. But then by the time I got out of business school in 2001, Americans and Europeans actually topped the top 6. By 2020, more than half of those are Chinese companies now. So you really have to keep an open mind. There's no way you can plan which way the world's going to evolve. So I think if you're have this mentality that you're not afraid of challenges, I think you'll do really well.
Stephen, are you saying Chinese are not good golfers? Was that the lesson that we learned from that?
I can say that I'm not a good golfer because Dartmouth and Tuck, we have a lot of snow, so I try my best. So.
Yes, indeed, indeed. All right, here's another question which came in. This one's for you, James. I'll direct it to you. COVID has exposed a lot of stuff, right? It's exposed what we're good at, but it's also exposed what we're bad at. In your experience in the last 10 months, 11 months, what has COVID made you realize about yourself, both good and bad?
Okay, actually, I kind of forgot what is COVID. It's just some fatigue. The good thing is I'm able to do a lot of Zoom calls. I'm actually able to get up early, so that's and also I wouldn't say I'm good at, but I'm forced to just live a new life where I eat and sleep and Zoom. So that's I guess the good thing. The good thing about COVID is just getting to doing a lot of things also by myself. Otherwise, I think I have to seek help in a lot of areas, and now you really don't have much of a choice. Grocery and go home and do a lot of things by yourself. I mean, not really that many bad things. Maybe I should work out more. Work out more and eat less. So yeah, so these are the things. But I do want to add in, kicking one extra piece is really don't panic. We for example, the head of Indian office, the whole family is positive, and nobody had a symptom. It's not that bad. Life will go on. So yeah, so I don't really have a big COVID story, probably similar to a lot of other people.
Thank you. Ash has been asking some great questions, and he's finally unmuted. We'd love to hear your voice. So quick question, Ash.
Yeah.
Who are you?
Sure. Yeah. Hey, by the way, thank you everyone for being here, and thank you for letting me ask so many questions. This has been incredibly insightful. I'm an MBA too, and I've accepted GSK's rotational program, so I know that I'll be abroad for at least 2 years. I've had the fortune to work in Taiwan for at least a year, and when I was there, I was culturally stepping on everybody's toes. And I guess I'm a little bit afraid to, when I do my rotational programs, especially if I'm in a culture that I'm not aware of, to maybe ask people to go drinks and then maybe seen as a drinker, because that was something that happened in Taiwan. And I'd love to be able to find ways to connect with people, but I don't want to blur the lines, especially because I want to be able to grab the reins of the strategy and be a leader. So I know we talked about connecting with people, but is there a way to maybe do this in a culture that you're not familiar with and still be able to be seen as a leader? And how would you go about doing that?
Yeah, this is good. Let's go with Tom, and then we'll get Stephen in on this. Both of whom have great international experiences.
Yeah. So you know what? Probably the most important thing when I first went over to Hong Kong about 20 years ago was you want to build relationships first with the people you're working with, the locals, right? So one thing I learned was I would be in a meeting with some senior executives over at, for example, Hutchison Whampoa, that makes up 25% of the stock exchange of Hong Kong. And until the 10 cent and all that, Mr. Lee used to be the richest man in Asia. And so I'd go into meetings, and then what I would hear is, that's quite interesting. That's really good, so on and so forth. And culturally, I would say, that was great, right? We're going to have some add-on business. But then, since I never went alone, I always brought someone from, the office who was local and knew the culture. He would say, Thomas, that meeting went very badly, right? And I'm like, well, what do you mean it went badly? He ended up saying, good things. He said, yeah, but he also told a story, right? And you as an American, you're not used to stories, right? You just get the bottom line, which is, oh, it was good, thank you. The story was meant to educate you and to let you know that there's things that you need to do that you haven't done from that standpoint. So I'll just step back and finish on the point is leverage the people who are already there that know the culture and learn from them.
Good, very good advice. Stephen, any thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, Ash, my parents are actually from Taiwan, so one thing I want to say is that no matter where you are, people really appreciate the fact that you care about their culture. Similar to the advice that Thomas would be giving, seek out those local mentors, right? Like I said, my first experience in Tokyo, I have two choices. I can hang out with the other expats, go to Roppongi, drink all I want, and I'll still be a gaijin, right? After two, but I did that, but also I find time to really understand and meet local colleagues, and we have common interests. Not golf because I'm not good at it, but you know, I happen to be in my Japanese history mode. We would discuss common topics that they find amusing that someone like me would even know about Battle of Sekigahara and the different daimyos. but I have to confess that's all from the Koi video game that I just picked up. but nevertheless, it created a bond, and then that carried over you know, over and over again every time I go to a new place.
Yeah, great advice, Stephen. Ash, I'm also actually an expat. I'm originally from Canada. I've been living here in the United States for, I don't know, 20 years now. But I've lived and worked and traveled to 89 countries around the world. And I think what Tom and Stephen both said, very important. I would summarize it a little bit thusly. Be a better listener than you are a talker. Like, listen more than talk. Yes. We have about 2 minutes remaining. I want to do last 2 minutes, kind of rapid fire, quick answers. Here we go. We're going to start with James. One piece of advice for a new graduate for the world of consulting.
Follow your own judgment.
That's it. I gave you 30 seconds, man.
Oh,
Follow your
okay.
own judgment.
Yeah, most of us know what is right for, you know, I mean, people probably at this stage of a career, the size of the name, you know, have a different impact. But in reality, I think most organization firms and people are all good, not all that different. But there are those, you know, some firms, some organization fit some people better. So if you go to a place that fits you, you're gonna thrive. If you go to a place just for, you know, what it appears to be, then it may not be the best for your future. So just, you know, actually we know, but probably we're reluctant to follow our own guts. So follow your own gut, your judgment.
Great piece of advice. Follow your gut and yeah, follow your gut. Good. Tom, one piece of advice.
Yeah, what I would do is don't focus so much on any one topic like finance and all those things. What's much more important is the ability to learn. Because when I look at my career, what I learned from my MBA might have been useful when I first went into consulting for my first project, but then quickly I learned everything I did at A.T. Kearney from A.T. Kearney. And when I look at Accenture, what I would have done 20 years ago is vastly different than what I do today. So you've got to have that ability to be curious and to learn, right, in unstructured ways. Because when you graduate and whatever you do, I can guarantee you 10, 20 years down the road, will not be doing what you will not be doing what you've done in the past. And I think a quick statistic was something like 70% of all the work we'll be doing in the next 20 years has not even been invented or thought of yet.
Love it. I absolutely love it. Sometimes here at Michigan, we call that the growth mindset. Have a growth mindset in your career. Good. Stephen, you got the last word here. What's your piece of advice for these young consulting wannabes?
Yeah, and then again, my esteemed fellow colleagues and professor already touched on it. I really think in the end, consulting is a people business, right? So communication. So if you're in your MBA program, you may think that learning how to model or come out with a greatest deck is the most important thing. But in the end, it's not about showing off how smart you are. It's more about how you can actually relate to the decision makers. So they're the ones who's making the tough decisions based on the input that you have. So it's ability to recognize that you're there to support and not to run their business. Ultimately, they're the decision maker and you're not taking over their role. And then I think this humbleness and being human and is what makes consultants who we are, that we're supporting them, not taking over their job.
Pearls of wisdom. Wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, would you join me in thanking our 3 panelists in our consulting panel tonight? Golf clap, everybody. Golf clap. Stephen, this is called a golf clap. Can you at least do the golf clap? There we go. Great. Stephen, Tom, James, thank you so much for your participation tonight. Tom and James, it's great to have you back. You're now alumni of this program. Stephen, we hope we can call on you once again to join us and share your experiences with us. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me this evening, for some of you this morning. And as always, forever, go blue. See you next time.
Go blue.
Bye-bye.
Go blue.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.